All right. What is up, amazing people? It's Emily Carter here. And if you're looking for a story that'll have you on the edge of your seat, questioning everything you thought you knew about family, well, you've come to the right place. We're about to dive deep into a tale of betrayal, hidden truths, and one woman's fight to reclaim her identity. So buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. I'm Emily Carter, 30 years old, standing between two freshly dug graves on a crisp autumn morning that absolutely shouldn't exist. My art students would be starting their watercolor projects right now, but instead, I'm watching twin caskets being lowered into the ground. My parents, gone within 3 weeks of each other. The cemetery workers move with practiced efficiency, their faces a professional blank that makes this nightmare feel even more surreal. Across from me stands my older sister, Rachel. Her designer black dress immaculate, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the tight line of her mouth. She hasn't looked at me once during the entire service. It doesn't make sense. Just last Christmas, Dad had gathered us around the fireplace, his laugh warming the room more than any flame. "My girls are my whole world," he'd said. Now that world is shattered. And something about the way Rachel is standing, rigid and separate, sends a chill through me that has nothing to do with the October wind. Earlier, I caught her in deep conversation with Mr. Thompson, our family's attorney for decades. They fell silent the moment I approached. Mr. Thompson's kind eyes suddenly unable to meet mine. The reception afterward was small and subdued at our family home, where Rachel cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling the coffee pot. "Things will be different now," she said, her voice soft, but edged with something I couldn't identify. I assumed she meant without our parents, that we'd need to lean on each other more, maybe even grow closer through our shared grief. I had no idea that different meant she'd try to erase me from our family entirely. Growing up in our quiet New England suburb, I was always Rachel's little sister, 4 years younger and seemingly living in a different universe. Our father, David, was a kind-hearted accountant who balanced spreadsheets by day and built wooden treasure boxes for us by night, while our mother, Susan, was the nurse everyone requested at Boston General Hospital, known for her gentle touch and unflinching competence. They met in college, Dad spilling coffee on Mom's psychology textbook, and married 6 months later in a story they loved retelling at every anniversary. From my earliest memories, Rachel claimed ownership over everything: toys, friends, and especially our parents' attention. When I was 5 and Rachel 9, she received a beautiful dollhouse for her birthday. I wasn't allowed to touch it even after Mom suggested sharing. "It's mine!" Rachel had insisted, actually slapping my hand when I reached for a tiny chair. The sting faded, but the memory didn't. Rachel's 10th birthday party became a neighborhood legend when she announced to everyone that I had ruined everything because I accidentally knocked over her cake trying to help Mom bring it out. I spent the rest of the party hiding in my room, hearing the laughter downstairs and feeling like an intruder in my own home. In high school, when I won a regional art competition, Rachel somehow turned the dinner conversation to her debate team victory from 3 months prior. Dad tried to redirect. "Emily's painting is going to be displayed at the state capitol." But Rachel interrupted with statistics about how many people actually see student artwork versus how many colleges look at debate achievements. Even at my college graduation, as I clutched my fine arts degree with honors, Rachel managed to announce her first corporate job offer during my celebration dinner, complete with salary details that ensured my achievement felt small in comparison. Through it all, our parents tried to mediate, creating family traditions to bridge the gap between us. Mom initiated Sunday brunches where phones weren't allowed, and Dad created art and adventure days where he'd take us to museums followed by ice cream. I connected deeply with Dad during these outings, his genuine interest in my artistic perspective making me feel truly seen. "You have a special way of looking at the world, Emily," he'd say as we stood before paintings others rushed past. The summer beach house in Martha's Vineyard became our refuge, 2 weeks each July, where Rachel seemed to soften slightly. Perhaps because there were enough friends and activities that she didn't need to compete for attention. Our last family vacation before Dad got sick almost fooled me into thinking we could be normal sisters. We built a massive sandcastle together, laughing as the tide threatened our creation. For those few hours, I glimpsed what might have been possible. But by dinner, Rachel was back to correcting my stories and speaking over me. I never stopped trying to connect with her, sending birthday cards with personal notes, asking about her work, suggesting sister weekends that she always had excuses to decline. I wanted so badly to believe that someday she would see me as an ally rather than competition. That the bond I imagined sisters should have might eventually take root between us. Despite decades of evidence suggesting otherwise, hope is a stubborn thing. Dad's cancer diagnosis 3 years ago came like a thunderclap on a clear day. Stage 4, pancreatic. Words that emptied the oxygen from every room. I immediately requested a transfer from the Philadelphia Art School, where I was teaching, to a position closer to home, while Rachel continued her high-powered financial consulting job in New York City, flying in for occasional weekends that seemed more obligation than devotion. "Some of us can't just abandon our careers," she said when Mom gently asked if she could visit more often. I moved into my old bedroom and established a routine of driving Dad to chemotherapy appointments, holding his hand through the nausea and weakness that followed. During his better moments, we set up art therapy sessions in the sunroom, his once steady hands learning to express through broad strokes what precision could no longer accomplish. "This is the most honest painting I've ever done," he joked, looking at his abstract creation. But I saw the truth in the vibrant yellows, fighting through ominous darkness. Rachel called twice a week, conversations Dad looked forward to but which often left him drained from maintaining a cheerful facade. "She's busy, Emily," he'd defend her absence, "and she was never good with hospitals," as if I was somehow naturally equipped for watching my father shrink before my eyes. One evening, during what would be his final hospital stay, Dad asked the nurses for privacy and motioned me closer to his bed. "Family is complicated," he whispered, his voice sandpaper rough. "There are things hidden in plain sight that matter most." I assumed it was the medication talking, but something in his expression made me pay attention. "I've always tried to be fair to both my girls," he continued, "but fairness and equality aren't always the same thing." When I asked what he meant, he squeezed my hand and changed the subject, asking about my latest art class. He died 3 days later while I dozed in the chair beside him, his hand growing cold in mine before I realized he was gone. Rachel arrived 2 hours after my desperate call, her perfect makeup intact and a coffee cup from the airport still in hand. Mom's decline was a swift and terrible thing, grief consuming her from within. The doctors called it broken heart syndrome, but no clinical term could capture the way she simply stopped participating in life. I took unpaid leave from school, running between her doctor's appointments and managing the household bills while trying to keep my own grief from pulling me under. Rachel began appearing more frequently, though oddly, she often insisted on private time with Mom, closing the bedroom door with the firm, "Mom needs rest, Emily." I'd find them whispering together. Conversations that abruptly halted when I entered with medication or meals. Once passing by the slightly open door, I caught Mom's confused voice saying, "But that doesn't seem right. Are you sure that's what David wanted?" Followed by Rachel's smooth reassurance. In her final week, Mom's lucidity came and went like radio signals in a storm. During one clear moment, she clutched my hand and said, "Remember that your father and I always wanted what was best for both of you girls." Then, almost apologetically, "Sometimes we make mistakes trying to make things right." She died in her sleep that Friday night, both Rachel and I in the house, but separated by walls of unspoken tension. The funeral arrangements became a subtle battlefield. Rachel insisted on closed caskets despite Mom's previously stated wishes, selected the most expensive floral arrangements over my suggestions of Mom's favorite wildflowers, and positioned herself as the primary decision-maker with the funeral director. At the small family gathering after the joint funeral, Rachel stood by the fireplace, effectively holding court as distant relatives and family friends offered condolences. I moved between kitchen and living room with trays of food, feeling strangely like staff rather than daughter in my childhood home. Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, hugged me tightly in the hallway and whispered, "Stay strong, sweetheart. Your mother worried about what would happen when she was gone." 3 days after the funeral, I met Rachel at the office of Mr. Thompson, our family's attorney for 30 years. Mr. Thompson was a grandfatherly figure who'd attended every major family event, his bow ties and kind smile a fixture in our lives. His office smelled of leather-bound books and furniture polish, comfortingly unchanged since my childhood visits. My confusion began when Rachel arrived 20 minutes late. With a sharp-suited younger man, she introduced as my attorney, James Sterling. Mr. Thompson's bushy eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor as we settled into the overstuffed chairs across from his desk. The initial reading proceeded as expected. The family home to be shared between Rachel and me, investment accounts split equally, personal items to be divided as our parents had discussed with each of us. I felt a wave of gratitude for their thoughtfulness, ensuring neither daughter would feel shortchanged. Then Rachel cleared her throat. "Before we continue, I have questions about Emily's adoption status as it pertains to inheritance law." The room seemed to tilt sideways as Mr. Thompson looked up from the documents, clearly confused. "Adoption status? I'm not aware of any adoption in the family, Rachel." Rachel smiled thinly, placing a hand on her attorney's sleeve. "My parents took Emily in when she was an infant. They raised her as their own, which was incredibly generous, but legally speaking, she isn't family." My lungs forgot how to function. As Mr. Thompson turned to me, his expression concerned. "Emily, is this something your parents discussed with you?" I shook my head, unable to form words. Rachel continued smoothly. "It was a private family matter. They didn't want Emily to feel different, so they didn't formalize much paperwork." I believe that creates some complications regarding inheritance. Mr. Thompson removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This is the first I'm hearing of this." David and Susan never mentioned anything about Emily not being their biological daughter in 30 years of handling their legal affairs. Rachel's attorney interjected with practiced confidence. "We have reason to believe they kept it quiet for emotional reasons, but legally it would affect the distribution of assets." Mr. Thompson suggested postponing the rest of the reading until this unexpected matter could be investigated, his kind eyes apologetic as they met mine. In the parking lot, I finally found my voice, confronting Rachel beside her gleaming BMW. "What was that?" "You know I'm not adopted." Rachel adjusted her designer sunglasses, looking almost bored. "It was just a question, Emily. If you're so certain, you have nothing to worry about." She slid into her car, adding before closing the door, "I'm simply making sure our parents' wishes are followed correctly." I drove straight to my best friend Olivia's apartment, collapsing on her couch in tears of confusion and betrayal. "She's lying," Olivia insisted, pouring me a glass of wine despite the early hour. "Why would your parents never mention something like that?" That evening, I returned to the family home, using my key to enter through the kitchen. The house felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves were watching me with new suspicion. I spent hours searching through the home office filing cabinets, finally locating my birth certificate in a folder labeled Emily, Important Documents. It clearly listed David and Susan Carter as my parents. A small wave of relief washed over me, though the fact that I needed proof at all was its own kind of pain. When Rachel returned the next day, I confronted her with the document. She examined it with an expression of mild interest before handing it back. "I must have been mistaken," she said with a shrug. "Grief does strange things to memory, doesn't it?" Her casual dismissal was somehow worse than an argument would have been. "I'm sorry if I upset you," she added, though her eyes remained cool and evaluating. Against my better judgment, I accepted her apology, desperate to preserve what little family I had left. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered through the house, running my fingers over familiar photographs and mementos. In the living room cabinet where Mom kept the family photo albums, I noticed gaps on the shelf. 3 albums were missing, all containing photos from my early childhood. In Dad's study, the drawer where he kept special family keepsakes was partially empty. Several items I remembered clearly, now nowhere to be found. When I mentioned the missing items to Rachel over breakfast, she looked surprised. Mom was doing a lot of reorganizing in her final months. Maybe she moved them to the attic, but something in her too innocent expression told me I wouldn't find them there either. The systematic dismantling of my place in the family began quietly, but escalated with breathtaking efficiency. One Tuesday afternoon, returning from grocery shopping with ingredients to make Dad's favorite lasagna recipe as a small memorial dinner, I found my key no longer worked in the front door of our family home. After 15 minutes of trying, I called Rachel, who arrived an hour later looking irritated. "Oh, I should have told you. I upgraded the security system after someone tried to break into the Andersons' house down the street. Here's your new key." She handed me a single key, not the full set I'd had before. Inside, I headed toward my childhood bedroom, which I'd been using since moving back to help with Dad, only to find the door locked. "I had to secure some of Mom's jewelry and important papers," Rachel explained, not meeting my eyes. "I'll get you a key for that tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week, became never. The following Saturday, I arrived at the house to find a small moving team carrying my art supplies and personal belongings from my bedroom down to the front hall. "Your sister said you're moving these to your apartment?" the lead mover explained apologetically. When I protested that I had no apartment locally, having given up my Boston place to care for our parents, he simply shrugged and continued working under Rachel's distant supervision from the staircase. That evening, I discovered my personal art studio in the converted garden shed had been completely emptied. The space now filled with lawn equipment and storage boxes. "We need to be practical about the house if we're selling it," Rachel said when I confronted her, though no discussion of selling had yet occurred. Her tactics grew bolder weekly. My childhood furniture disappeared, donated to charity without consultation. Family friends began avoiding my calls, making vague excuses when I suggested coffee or lunch. During a chance encounter with my mother's best friend, Kathy Miller, at the supermarket, she seemed uncomfortable, almost guilty. "I heard you've been having a hard time adjusting," she said carefully. "Rachel mentioned you might need some professional help." The implications stabbed deep. Later that week, Aunt Carol called, her voice concerned. "Emily, sweetheart, what's this? Rachel is telling everyone about you being unstable. She told your Uncle Bob you'd been making scenes and demanding money from the estate that isn't yours." My attempts to organize family dinners to clear the air were systematically sabotaged, with Rachel canceling at the last minute 3 times in a row. "Emergency at work," the text would say, or "coming down with something. Don't want to risk getting you sick." When I tried calling our elderly grandparents in South Florida, Rachel had somehow gotten there first. "Grandma sounded strange on the phone," I told Olivia after a particularly troubling call. She kept saying she's sure everything will work out for the best and that family situations can be complicated. The photo evidence of my existence continued to vanish from the family home. The large framed portrait of me at high school graduation disappeared from the hallway. The Christmas photo of all four of us from 2 years ago was replaced with one featuring just Rachel with our parents. My artwork that had hung proudly in the living room was removed, the walls repainted as if it had never existed. The neighborhood began to whisper. At the local coffee shop, I overheard 2 women who had known our family for years murmuring about the adoption situation with the Carter girls and how the younger one apparently isn't taking it well. The systematic erasure of my place in the family pushed me into a deepening depression. I began avoiding social situations, dreading the inevitable awkward questions or pitying looks. My first panic attack came when I visited the house to collect some remaining books and found my childhood bedroom completely renovated into a home office. Every trace of my existence methodically removed, I sat on the floor beside the new desk, struggling to breathe, the walls closing in as my past was literally painted over. My hands shook so badly I couldn't unlock my phone to call for help. Eventually, the property manager for the house next door found me sitting in my car, still hyperventilating, and called paramedics. The incident led me to start weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Jennifer Miller, who specialized in grief and family trauma. "What you're describing sounds like gaslighting," she said during our 3rd session. "Your sister is systematically attempting to make you question your own reality and identity." The clinical term somehow validated what I'd been experiencing, giving shape to the formless dread that had become my constant companion. Each night, I fell asleep clutching the necklace my father had given me on my 16th birthday, the only tangible proof I had left that I had once been loved as a daughter. The horror of beginning to doubt your own existence is impossible to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. By the 3rd month after my parents' death, Rachel's campaign had wormed its way into my subconscious. I began having night terrors where I was a small child abandoned on our family doorstep. My parents reluctantly taking me in while their real daughter watched resentfully from the stairs. I'd wake gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, the dreams so vivid I could smell the rain and feel the chill of the night air. During daylight hours, I tried to fight back with logic and evidence. I conducted an online search for adoption records in Massachusetts from my birth year, finding nothing with my name or my parents as adoptive guardians. I visited the hospital where I was born, speaking with the records department, who confirmed my birth certificate was genuine, showing Susan Carter as my birth mother. One rainy Tuesday, I tracked down Kathy Miller, my mother's oldest nursing school friend, meeting her at a small cafe far from our neighborhood to avoid gossip. Kathy's face clouded with anger when I explained why I wanted to meet. "That's absolute nonsense," she said firmly, reaching across to grip my trembling hands. "I was there in the delivery room when Susan had you. Rachel was waiting outside with your father. You were 7 pounds 6 ounces and came out with a full head of dark hair just like David's." Susan joked that at least one of her daughters took after him. She rummaged in her purse, producing a faded photograph of herself holding a newborn me, my mother in a hospital bed beside her. "I've kept this all these years." Further evidence emerged when I found Mom's pregnancy journal in a box of books Rachel hadn't yet cleared out. The water-damaged pages contained weekly entries throughout Mom's pregnancy with me, detailing her cravings for strawberry ice cream, Dad's excitement at feeling me kick, and Rachel's mixture of curiosity and jealousy about her coming sibling. "Rachel asked today if we could send the baby back if she cries too much," Mom had written in her neat handwriting. "We explained that's not how sisters work, but I worry about her adjustment." I discovered an old VHS tape at my Aunt Carol's house labeled Emily's First Week, showing footage of my clearly exhausted mother cradling me in the hospital. Dad beaming beside her, and a sullen 4-year-old Rachel being coaxed to give her new sister a gentle pat. Dad's former colleague from the accounting firm, now retired, mentioned during a chance meeting at the hardware store how proud David had always been of having 2 biological daughters who looked so different but were both so smart. He seemed confused when I tensed at the word biological, asking if I was feeling unwell. With each piece of evidence, I confronted Rachel, who dismissed everything with practiced ease. Mom's journal? She was always writing fiction, you know that. Or, old photos can be from anywhere, Emily. People fostered children temporarily all the time back then. When I presented the hospital records, she suggested they could have been modified out of kindness since our parents had connections there. Most disturbingly, she began suggesting a DNA test, while simultaneously setting up obstacles. I'd be happy to do a DNA test to settle this once and for all, she said, with artificial sweetness. Of course, you'd need to sign this document first, acknowledging that if the results show what we both know they will, you'll renounce any claim to the inheritance. Her attorney had drafted the document, dense with legal language that my own hastily secured lawyer advised me not to sign under any circumstances. My identity crisis deepened with each passing week. If I wasn't David and Susan Carter's daughter, who was I? Had my entire childhood been an elaborate performance of family, with everyone but me knowing the truth? I began scrutinizing old photographs for signs I'd missed, analyzing my features against my parents, wondering if my artistic ability was genetic or merely coincidence. The worst moment came when Rachel orchestrated a concerned intervention with 2 family friends, suggesting my increasing instability warranted professional help beyond my weekly therapy. "We're just worried about you, clinging to this fantasy when the evidence is so clear," Rachel said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. While the friends nodded uncomfortably, I fled the house in tears, their pitying expressions burning into my back. That evening, Rachel's attorney sent a formal letter stating their intent to contest any portion of the inheritance I might receive, citing new evidence regarding familial status that would be presented to the court. I sat on the floor of my rented room, surrounded by the scattered pieces of my identity, wondering if it would be easier to simply walk away from everything, even my name. The formal legal challenge arrived on embossed letterhead from Sterling Associates, informing me that Rachel Carter was petitioning the court to invalidate my claim as a beneficiary of David and Susan Carter's estate on the grounds that I was not legally or biologically related to the deceased. A mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Mr. Thompson's office with the ominous note that all parties are encouraged to bring any relevant documentation regarding familial relationships. The 5 days before the meeting passed in a blur of anxiety and frantic preparation. I gathered every piece of evidence I had managed to salvage: my birth certificate, school records listing my parents' names, the few photographs Rachel hadn't managed to destroy or hide. My newly hired attorney, a recent law school graduate named Tyler, who was the only one I could afford, reviewed the materials with obvious concern. "This is very unusual," he admitted. Typically, adoption status wouldn't even be questioned without substantial evidence from the challenging party. The mediation room felt airless when I arrived, Mr. Thompson looking uncomfortable behind his large desk. Rachel and her attorney already seated in premium leather chairs across from him. A court-appointed mediator, Ms. Davis, sat to one side, her expression professionally neutral as she arranged papers before her. I took the remaining seat, painfully aware of my wrinkled blouse and scuffed shoes beside Rachel's immaculate appearance. Rachel opened with a performance worthy of an Oscar, her voice catching as she described how our parents had taken in a child in need and raised her as their own out of the goodness of their hearts. Her attorney presented a folder of documents, most of which I couldn't see clearly from my position. "As you can see from these records, he intoned gravely. There are significant inconsistencies in Emily's early documentation that support our client's understanding of the situation. Mr. Thompson frowned as he reviewed the papers, his eyebrows drawing together. These appear to be selective records, he noted. The Carters were clients of mine for over 30 years, and this contradicts everything in my understanding of the family. Rachel dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. It was a private family matter, Mr. Thompson. My parents didn't want it widely known to protect Emily's feelings. They were such kind people. When my turn came to respond, my voice shook so badly I could hardly form sentences. I presented my evidence, which suddenly seemed pitiful against Rachel's elaborate narrative. The mediator reviewed everything with methodical thoroughness, occasionally asking questions that made my stomach clench. "And you have no recollection of any conversations with your parents about your origins?" she asked, her pen poised above her notepad. My no sounded weak, even to my own ears. As the session progressed, Rachel's attorney suggested that to avoid further emotional distress and potential public embarrassment, I might consider voluntarily withdrawing any claim to the estate beyond a small good faith settlement to honor the Carters' generosity in raising you. I looked to Mr. Thompson for support, but he studied his desk, his earlier confidence noticeably diminished. Rachel's gaze locked with mine across the table, and as I began to cry from frustration and betrayal, the corner of her mouth curved upward in a smile only I could see. Then came the devastating blow. "I'm sorry it's come to this, Emily," Rachel said, her voice carrying just the right note of regretful finality. "You've never been family. My parents just felt sorry for you." I stumbled from the room, vision blurred with tears, barely registering the mediator calling for a recess. In my car, parked 3 blocks away, I finally allowed the complete emotional breakdown that had been building for months. My screams filled the small space, raw and animal in their intensity. The grief of losing not just my parents, but my entire identity pouring out until my throat was raw. That night, I lay on the thin mattress in my rented room, staring at the water stains on the ceiling as rain tapped against the window. My phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Thompson. "Emily, after reviewing the situation, I would recommend considering a settlement to avoid lengthy legal proceedings and additional fees. The betrayal from this man who had known me since childhood was the final straw." I began packing my few remaining possessions, contemplating moving across the country, changing my name, starting over as someone new since Emily Carter apparently never truly existed anyway. Sorting through the small box of personal items I'd managed to keep from Rachel's purge, my fingers brushed against something at the bottom, hidden beneath old scarves and mementos. It was a small wooden box my father had carved for my 21st birthday, inlaid with mother of pearl in a pattern resembling paintbrushes and flowers. I'd always treasured it as a perfect embodiment of how well he knew me, but in the chaos of recent months, I'd forgotten I still had it. Dad's woodworking had been his sanctuary, the garage workshop, his retreat from accounting spreadsheets and family tensions. He'd made furniture, toys, and decorative boxes, often incorporating hidden compartments or clever locking mechanisms that delighted us as children. Rachel had received a similar box for her birthday, though hers featured a business motif with tiny inlaid calculator and briefcase designs. Running my fingers along the familiar contours, I remembered Dad's last strange conversation about things hidden in plain sight. On impulse, I began examining the box more carefully, pressing different parts of the inlay, looking for anything unusual. After nearly 20 minutes of exploration, I noticed that pressing the center of the largest mother-of-pearl flower while simultaneously sliding the bottom panel created a clicking sound. Heart pounding, I repeated the motion and watched in amazement as a previously invisible drawer slid out from the side of the box. Inside lay a sealed envelope, my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. "To my daughter Emily, when you need the truth most. The letter was dated just 3 months before his death, during a period when he was between hospital stays and it seemed briefly stronger. With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the envelope, unfolding several pages covered in Dad's increasingly shaky handwriting. "My dearest Emily," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone and something has happened to make you doubt your place in our family. I've known Rachel her entire life. And while I've loved both my daughters equally, I've always recognized her struggles with jealousy and her need to be the center of attention. Your mother and I tried everything to help her develop a healthier perspective, including therapy during her teenage years, but some patterns became deeply ingrained." The letter continued, detailing incidents I'd never known about. Rachel attempting to sabotage my college applications by hiding acceptance letters. Rachel convincing childhood friends that I'd said cruel things about them. Rachel once switching my medication for severe menstrual cramps with similar-looking vitamins, leaving me in agony during an important art exhibition. "We should have addressed these issues more firmly," Dad wrote. "Regret evident in every word." By trying to keep the peace and not taking sides, we allowed her behavior to continue unchecked. "I fear this has done a disservice to both of you." Then came the paragraph that made my breath catch. "Let me be absolutely clear, Emily. You are our biological daughter. Your mother carried you for 9 months, 2 weeks overdue, actually, and you were born at Boston General Hospital on April 17th at 3:42 a.m. after 36 hours of labor. Your first word was moon, pointing at the night sky from your crib. You took your first steps the day after your first birthday, reaching for a paintbrush." Whoa, can you believe that? Talk about a bombshell. What do you think Emily is going to do with this truth bomb from her dad? How will Rachel react when she finds out? The drama is just getting started, folks. If you were gripped by Emily's story, smash that like button right now. Let me know in the comments what you think should happen next, and if you've ever dealt with a tricky family dynamic. And seriously, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on what happens next. Hit that notification bell too, so you're always in the loop. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share this video with them. Let's get this conversation going. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.